Thank you, Dr. Ivan. Thank you for the introduction. Let me also thank Professor Selvan and Dr. Hugo, with whom I have got introduced online. And I would like to thank all of you along with organizing College of Griffith School of Engineering and Built Environment, Australia, and Assistant College of Engineering, the organizer, who, as well as the Professor Selvan, who has given me the opportunity to talk in this very important program, which is Webinar in Engineering Education. So what I felt like I have just gone through some of the contents. It's really important in a current scenario to have such talks and discussions when we are in a quite a turbulent phase of education system especially due to this current pandemic and post-pandemic conditions. So we need to review, we need to retrospect, and then look for the prospects, which is important for all of us as an academician, the different aspect of this teaching learning system, and especially in this engineering and technology when we talk about. So I have chosen the talk on assessment, evaluation, and grading, especially because it is an integral part of our education, especially the higher education system. When we talk about, as Dr. Ivan also mentioned, that how important it is, assessment and grading in his inaugural talk. So let me first give you some of the glance of the education policy. So that is important. That is the reason I have kept the contents of my talk, the first part itself as the education policy. Then I have brought in assessment and evaluation, and then grading practices. Because as an academician, as an teacher, when we talk about assessment and evaluation method, it is important to understand what is our education policy, what is the philosophy of that policy, and what is expected from that particular policy and how it should run. So I have not put any comparison with the other education policy. Rather, I have brought in here some of the vital chapters of education policy in context of India itself. So it is important to understand some of the philosophical points of the education policy before we straight away jump into the assessment, evaluation, and grading system, what should be followed and how it should be followed. Let me just give you a glimpse of some ancient education system in India. So education in India, especially the Indian subcontinent, began with the teaching of very traditional elements such as Indian religion, Indian mathematics, Indian logic at early Hindu and Buddhist centers, especially of learning, such as it must be known to you, like ancient Takshila, and which is currently in modern day Pakistan, and Nalanda in India. And then further moving on, there were further new addition to this education system due to Islamic education, which became ingrained with this establishment of Islamic empires in the Indian subcontinent in the Middle Ages. And then further coming of the Europeans later brought Western education to colonial India. So several Western style universities were established during the period of British rule in 19th century, and further moving from 19th to 20th century, a series of measures continuing throughout this earlier half of the 20th century, which ultimately laid the foundation of the educational system of the Republic of India, and that time simultaneously for Pakistan and much of the Indian subcontinent. So as when we talk about the education system, some of the important indicators are actually highlighters. One of them is in terms of literacy when we look into. So literacy in India grew very slowly until 1947, as you can see the trend here, which is shown. So then Let me just show this. Initial change or the gradient is very slow, and an acceleration can be noticed in the period of 1991 to 2000 period, and so on. So this actually also shows the different groups of literacy as well, starting from male, female, urban, rural, and so on. So the literacy rate in the country is 74%, and which again in male counterpart is more compared to the female counterpart as per the 2021 consensus. So female part is 65.46. So this is just for the progress and how the education progress can be seen in terms of one of the prime factor as literacy. So now further, I will not go in detail of each of this, just giving you the glance, like some of the glimpses of how pre-independence education system was established in 1830s, like in 19th century, from modern school system, which was brought to India from, as you have seen from the ancient education, and where in 1830s, modern subjects like sciences and mathematics, which took precedence, and metaphysics and philosophies were deemed unnecessary during that time. And then further, during that era, there are different education policies, like in Lord Macaulay in 1935, which attempt to create a system of education that educates only the upper strata of society through English. And moving on further, as you can see, 1904, Indian University Act was established. And I'm just talking mostly in context of India, so that it can be also correlated with the how education system has evolved in context of any other country as well. They might have their history and how we have come to 21st century. So it gives us how we have progressed, or how we have followed the transition and so on. So pre-independence, further moving in 1913, 1917. So there were a lot of education plans which has been brought into picture, like in 1944, Sergeant Plan of Education, where different age group has been given different recommendation of education system was given. Then also academics and technical and vocational education were also brought in. So also the commercial and art education and liquidation of adult literacy, which has been brought in. Now with this, when we move into the post-independence era, where three national education policy in context of India has been brought. The first one, which was in 1968, proposed, it is floated by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, which was based on particularly the report and recommendations of the Kothari commissions. And government of India announced the first national education policy, and which basically required from pre-independence to post-independence in terms of radical restructuring, and which proposed the equal education opportunity in order to achieve national integration, greater culture and economic development. So 1968 NEP, which mostly focused on development of human resources, but it did not put aside the potential of education in creating democratic society. Then the next education policy revamp was taken place in 1986, which was due to Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, and further it was modified also in 1992. So there were several changes and revisions also taken place in between. So this NEP, on the other hand, sought inculcate the feeling of secularism, developed a scientific temper, and fostered individual independence. Now, very recent, we have a quite huge revamp into our educational policy, and which was proposed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in this 2020. And this is the first education policy of this 21st century in India, and replaces a very old 34-year-old national policy in 1986. So there are a lot of challenging points which could be actually focused here in the education policy, which is important for any educators, academician to understand well, to design their teaching learning system, where further the evaluation and assessment which reflects how the teaching learning system takes place. So let me first give you some of the glimpse of why this new education policy was required and what was the changes, the major changes which was looked into. The first point which has been very much highlighted, that the old policy which produced graduates with which failed in producing the graduates with employability skills. And the second, generate research output in terms of patent and scholarly publications. So these were the failures which has been highlighted. So due to that, when the new proposal has been made, this points has been taken into consideration, and to address this challenge, the proposal of which supports multidisciplinary and cross-disciplinary education has been promoted here. Research in undergraduation and post-graduation level itself has been proposed. Then compared to the old education policy, where most of the HEIs had no autonomy in curriculum and evaluation design. This was again one of the challenge. And then in the coming education policy, it talks about all HEIs must have autonomy in deciding curriculum and evaluation. Also, the role of teaching faculty has been found meager, especially in evaluating the students directly. And this in new education policy, if we inspect, we find that examination is a part of continuous evaluation system in itself. Faculty members who are teaching a subject now are responsible for evaluation and examination, are again departmental affairs. Now you understand how important it is for an academician, for a teacher to understand how the evaluation, assessment and grading needs to be done so that we fulfill the outcome-based learning in itself. Again, I'll just add here that how again some more challenges has been found in the old policy, and the new policy has addressed that. The coursework of PhD programs, when we look into, which comprises of research methodology and core subject related study earlier. Now, in addition to this, in new education policy, more impetus has been given on teaching and curriculum development aspect itself, because apart from the degree holder, they are also actually the stakeholder in the education system, future education system. So it was important, it was found important to add this particular component into their curriculum. Now, some of the elevators were also proposed in higher education, especially based on this education policy, where it says in current scenario, the model of this learning or teaching learning system should be student-centric model. So what it says that a student learner-centric model, where students gets right to decide the subjects, whether he or she has to study from the institution, and can appear for competency-based evaluation in his or own pace. So competency-based continuous evaluation system, which has an advantage of evaluating skill sets of a student along with the knowledge and experience. Also, research and innovation has been inoculated into this kind of evaluation system also, which transforms the higher education system from information-centric to knowledge and innovation-centric, where solve all the problems of society optimally. This has been given more focus. And further, STEM to STEAM model. STEAM, as we understand that it is considered as better than STEM, because STEAM with experimental learning and research-based internship is the objective of the higher education section of NEP 2020. So just I'd like to refer here. I was just going through some of the talks in this webinar series, which is posted on your portal. One of the talk by Professor Selvan, which I have seen, like how he has talked about more arts than science. streams. This is what actually talks about the STEM to STEAM, moving from STEM to STEAM. So first bring in arts and then bring in science, then technology and engineering. So it is a huge challenge, like how to implement this in an acceptable way and implement workable fashion. So then some more elevators, which actually this education policy which has given further, was about the faculty productivity, which was more focused on research output. And obviously then teaching also gets integrated with this research in itself, when faculty productivity is based on the research output. Then autonomy at all levels, which was very much important, and it has been given a significant weightage into this new education policy, where higher education institutes, which have the autonomy to do innovations in deciding the courses, curriculum, pedagogy, examination, and evaluation. So could be able to improve the quality of educations offered by the stakeholders themselves. So at the same time, the development of education leaders, which should be the role model. So self-contribution to research and innovation is an important education leader. So new researchers get inspiration by seeing the contribution of leaders to perform better. So today's assessment and evaluation is not simply based on writing some exams on the paper. It should be designed in such a ways where such proposed elevators are also somewhere implemented. So again, accordingly, in the new policy, it has been focused on boosting of the online training. As we understand, we cannot avoid the online platform in current digital revolution. So use of information communication and computation technologies like including education technology, internet technology, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, which are very essential in effective implementation of this 21st century education, which is again compatible with the industry 4 education in itself. So the latest technology which help in planning, designing, offering effective online education to realize the characteristic of ideal education system. And at the same time, according to the education policy, it becomes inevitable to enhance the GER, like gross enrollment ratio, which was targeted in context of India to 50% by 2030. So some of the major targets which I will just brought in here, give you the glimpse where it has been proposed in this new education policy, where by 2040 all HEIs aim to become multidisciplinary institution, and where it aims to larger student enrollment for optimal use of infrastructure and resources for creation of vibrant multidisciplinary continuity. So there, which is proposed is 2 steps which can be followed. All HEIs which can be multidisciplinary, and it has been proposed that it should be achieved by 2030, gradually increase student strength to the target level. So for currently single stream HEIs, where it needs to be added departments across different fields, that would strengthen the current structure of single stream. So all these targets and the education policy, the understanding of that makes one faculty or the academician to understand and design their learning pedagogy, and at the same time evaluation system more effectively, so that this can be achieved. Am I audible?
Yes, Shibani, you are audible.
Yes, you're fine. Yeah. I think somebody else talking.
So further moving on, some more targets which needs to be understood well before we go into the very detailed understanding of evaluation and assessment component of our learning system. So education policy, when it fosters empowerment and autonomy, then more responsibility comes as an evaluator and assessor, that how do we design it so that effectively our learning outcomes are achieved. So where also affiliating universities has been granted to mentor affiliated colleges to develop their capabilities and achieve minimum benchmark. So responsibilities are huge. Also, some more targets which has been framed in this education policy, where from simply the university category deemed to be, and there are several categories deemed to be affiliating technical university and so on, needs to be simply replaced by university. So we are about to understand that some pedagogy which needs to be followed in context of such system, which should be universally acceptable. And at the same time fulfilling the criteria as per the norms. So university unanimously means multidisciplinary institutions of higher learning, which offers UG, PG and PhD programs and engages in high quality teaching and research. So now with this general introduction of education policy, in this current education policy, there is 27 chapters which has brought in with a lot of radical changes into the education policy, where chapter 1 to chapter 8, which is again grouped into part 1, talks about the school level education policies, whereas from chapter 9 to chapter 27, it's about the, talks about the higher education system, and which has again been grouped into 3 part 2, part 3, part 4. So I'm not going to talk about all these 27 chapters. I'll just giving you some of the chapters which needs to be understood in context of the education policy, so that as an evaluator, assessor, and developing our grading system, it gives us the backbone why should we and how we should go with the assessment, evaluation, and grading. So one of the important factor which is in chapter 9, it has been proposed as a new and forward-looking vision for higher education system in India, where the major problems has been identified. Like here it has been found that severely fragmented higher education ecosystem and less emphasis on the development of cognitive skills and learning outcomes, and also rigid separation of disciplines with early specialization and streaming of students into narrow areas of study, limited access, particularly in socio-economical disadvantaged areas with few HEIs that teach in local languages and so on, and also limited teacher and institutional autonomy. And further, inadequate mechanism, then lesser emphasis on research at most university and colleges, and lack of competitive peer-reviewed research funding across disciplines, suboptimal governance and leadership of HEIs, ineffective regulatory system, and large affiliating universities, resulting in low standards of undergraduate educations. So the key changes which has been proposed through this policy was HES system consisting of large multidisciplinary universities and colleges with at least one in or near every district, with more HEIs across India that offer the medium of instructions or programs in local Indian languages, more multidisciplinary undergraduate education, faculty and institutional autonomy, and most importantly, that revamping the curriculum, pedagogy, assessment, and student support for enhanced student experience. So now we understand this particular key changes needs to be effectively understood, and it should be implemented when we are into the evaluation and assessment of our learning objectives. So reaffirming the integrity of faculty and institutional leadership position through merit appointments, and these all are some of the key changes which has been proposed. Then establishment of National Research Foundation, governance of HEIs, also that was a very impactful statement, that light but tight regulations by a single regulator for higher education, which can obviously can lead to some kind of uniformity and standards in the standards. Then increased access, equity, and inclusion which is also proposed in the current education system. Also the open distance learning, which was again the component of this increased access, equity, and inclusion, which needs to be promoted and strengthened further. And in one of the chapters, which is chapter 11, talks about more holistic and multidisciplinary education. So what it asks is that all branches of creative human endeavor, including mathematics, science, vocational subjects, professional subjects, and soft skills, should be considered arts as distinctly Indian origins. Then integrate the humanities and arts with science and technology. As already I have mentioned, how from STEAM to STEAM we need to move, have consistently showed positive learning outcomes, including increased creativity and innovation, critical thinking and higher order thinking capacities, problem solving abilities, teamwork, communication skills, more in-depth learning, and mastery of curricula across fields, increases in social and moral awareness, etc. Holistic and multidisciplinary education for this particular 21st century and the fourth industrial revolution in itself. So even engineering institutions of greater importance or national importance needs to move towards more holistic and multidisciplinary education with more arts and humanities. So students of arts and humanities will aim to learn more science and will make an effort to incorporate more vocational subjects and soft skill in itself. And the next important factor, which is to be understood well, is the flexibility in curriculum, and novel and engaging course options will be an offer to students in addition to rigorous specialization in a subject or subjects in itself. So this will be encouraged by increased faculty and institutional autonomy in setting curricula again. So pedagogy will have an increased emphasis on communication, discussion, debate, research, and opportunities for cross-disciplinary and interdisciplinary thinking. Now, it needs to be noted here that this objectives of this education policy, where it has been given importance for more holistic and multidisciplinary education, where you can understand how the curricula needs to be set, how the pedagogy needs to be followed, so that like communication, discussion, debate, research. So our assessment and evaluation design also should have the backbone, as a backbone, this communication, discussion, debate, and research, etc. So that needs to be taken care when we are talking about those elements. Now, another chapter of which was again proposed in this education policy was chapter 12, where I'm not talking about all the chapters. As you can see, I'm just mentioning some of the chapter names where I could just highlight how it is related to evaluation, assessment, and grading system, and it affects directly our these elements of learning objectives. So optimal learning environment and support for the students has been given importance in the education policy. So what it says, that choice-based credit system, so it is required for instilling innovation and flexibility, where institutions to integrate academic plans which ranging from curriculum improvement to quality of classroom transfer, online distance learning to increase access to quality higher education, then distant learning renewed through concerted evidence-based efforts towards expansion while ensuring the standards of quality again. So this online distance learning aimed to be equivalent to highest quality in-class programs served in currently. Norms, standards, and guidelines for systematic development, regulations, and accreditations of ODL to be prepared, a framework for quality ODL. Then internationalization, which is again required for optimal learning environment and support for the students, as we understand in current scenario how important it is, and we cannot deny that fact. So large number of international students studying in India and provide greater mobility to students in India who may wish to visit, study at transfer credits to and carry out research at institutes abroad and vice versa itself. High performing Indian universities again will be encouraged to set up campuses and so on. This has been also proposed. Then credits acquired in foreign university will be permitted where appropriate as per the requirement of all HEIs to be counted for the award of a degree. So this needs to be kept in our mind when we are talking about all our elements of our learning system. Then student activity and participation also is an important factor to create the optimal learning environment where opportunities for participation in different activities like sports, cultures, eco clubs, activity clubs, and community service, etc. also is the part of the curriculum. They're part of the entire holistic development. In every education institutions, there shall be a counseling system for handling stress and emotional adjustment itself. So this again becomes the component in itself when we are evaluating and assessing. So whether direct or indirect. So the requisite support for students from rural backyard and etc. This also needs to be taken into consideration. All HEIs, which again ensures the quality medical facilities and so on. Now, one of the vital factors which has been also taken into consideration for such optimal environment was financial support for students, which is again has been given in terms of incentives, national scholarships, and so on, free ships and scholarships to the students. I'm not going into detail. So another factor which is again has been proposed in one of the section or what we can call chapter 24, the online and digital education, which is again inevitable to ensure equitable use of technology. So policy recommends some of the key initiatives where pilot studies for online education needs to be conducted, so that to conduct a series of pilot studies in parallel to evaluate the benefits of integrating education with online education and mitigating the downsides. Digital infrastructure, so there is a need to invest in creation of open, interoperable, evolvable public digital infrastructure in the education system and online teaching platform and tools. So there has been already initiatives and it is already in function. Some e-learning platforms like in context of India, if I take examples, Swayam, Diksha, and so on. So which is extended to provide teachers with a structured, user-friendly, rich set of assisted tools for monitoring progress of learners, students, content creation, digital repository, and dissemination. This is again a vital fact which we need to understand. At the same time that this is going to be promoted more and more. Then addressing the digital divide, again in context of India, it is important. Virtual labs are again important, especially when we talk about whether it is science, engineering, and arts, it is always required. So in India also some of this platform virtual labs has been given a good push, and so those are like Diksha, Swayam Prabha, and so on. Also, the most vital factor which needs to be understood here with this online and digital education, it is important that training and incentives for teachers needs to be looked on. So teachers training in learner-centric pedagogy and how to become high quality online content creator, that is one of the important factors which was also proposed, and it needs to be given emphasis. So emphasis on the teacher's role in facilitating active student engagement with the content and with each other. Online assessment and examination has become very much norm in current scenario. Blended models of learning, so importance to face-to-face and in-person learning is fully recognized. At the same time, laying down standards, which is important in this scenario as well. Standards will help to formulate guidelines for e-learning at different by different stakeholders, like maybe states, boards, schools, and school complexes, higher education, etc. So with this, now we understand in this education policy as an assessor and evaluator, if we have as a backbone a quite good understanding of what my education policy is, what are the expectation from that, then as an assessor, we can design the assessment, we can evaluate our learners, and we can create them to finally achieve the learning objectives. So let me just now bring this assessment part, assessment and evaluation part, some technical aspects which must be known to many of you, but let me also bring in here the assessment and evaluation needs to be understood quite well, as quite frequently we use this assessment and evaluation interchangeably. However, there is a fine difference between this assessment and evaluation. So assessment, if we talk about, it is assessment is for learning and assessment of learning. There are two kinds of assessment which are done, and then whatever is the assessment done for, whether it is for or of, some methods which is followed typically, which is grouped into criterion reference assessment and norm reference assessment. And as an assessor, we need to understand that what is assessment and when you should do assessment, what is evaluation and when you should do evaluation. So assessment, which needs to be understood as a qualitative integrator, which is done continuously while the learning is done. So it is to improve the quality, and evaluation, which is of quantitative nature, which gives us some kind of quantification that how much the learning is done to judge the quality it itself. So when we talk about norm reference and criterion reference, we should be judiciously choosing the method, as we understand it. There is a distinct factors which are taken into consideration when we follow norm reference and when we follow criterion reference. So norm reference are mostly followed when we give more importance simply to rank the student based on the test achievements, where relative scores are followed, and this is useful when we are to assess a large and huge number of students in a large section or class. So mostly it is followed at the end of the instruction, and it falls as a summative evaluation in itself. However, norm reference, because of its nature and the type which is followed, it is easy in grading, and it is also it follows that the level of performance is not clear prior to test in this method. And also it has been found that some unhealthy situation creates in this kind of system. It develops the rivalries because it follows the relative scores. However, it also an age-old classical system. In current scenario, criterion referenced system, if we look into, which is given more importance, it is mostly followed to measure the skills, the knowledge which is mastered, and scores given as %. However, it has also limited. It is more effective to assess the smaller number of students, a smaller class or bunch of students. So it is mostly based on when the test during the instructions or when the formative evaluation is taken care, and mostly it is found it is very motivating for the learners, and it supports and helping the individual learner, and expected level of performance is cleared prior to test. It also inspires individuals, and they found themselves compete with themselves. And in current scenario, it has also been found that it is the new trend which involves individualization. So individual assessment can be done, individual evaluation can be done if criterion referenced method is followed. So for an assessor or evaluator, it is quite challenging, like which method to follow exactly for which component of your assessment and evaluation. However, as an assessor and evaluator, the basic philosophy needs to be understood that optimal mix of this criterion referenced and non-reference assessment is required in overall conduction of or holistic conduction of a course or a subject, so that it should be aligned with the instructional objectives of the course, ruling out the teacher's subjective and biased notions on assessment by giving more preference to criterion reference assessment wherever possible. The multiple assessment evaluation practices with regard to new forms of learning, which is in current scenario, it has been found that is very effective, like teamwork-based collaborative learning, problem-based learning, active learning, etc. However, some of this characteristic also needs to be followed as as an assessor and evaluator when we design our assessment and evaluation components. So these characteristics gives us how sound and how effective our evaluation component has been designed. So one of these indicators is the validity, which says performance in a specific course content related to learning objective needs to be done, so that validity of that assessment and evaluation is done. Then reliability is another important factor, where again, if there are huge, you have a number of assessees, then in that case, consistency in score allotted needs to be followed. Objectivity, where a particular objective of the teaching and evaluating must not deviate. Evaluate the development in 3 domains, that is cognitive, affective, and psychomotor, which has been followed while designing this element. Then comprehensiveness is again an important factor, where less scope for comprehensiveness leaves with lower coverage if for example, essay type of assessment is done. But if high scope for comprehensiveness is to be followed with a large coverage, so there we follow short and objective type. Then assessor needs to actually understand well what should be the good combination of both, like and what is the coverage which needs to be included into the assessment and evaluation. Then diagnosticity is another important characteristic, where proper diagnosis of learners' difficulty in a class is important. Weaknesses without sacrificing the ethical standards, like when you design your assessment, it needs to be followed. Then practicability is another challenge for the assessor, because the assessor or evaluator has to design this component. So it should be followed in such a way so that it gives you ease in preparation, ease in administration at the same time, then ease in scoring. Now, there are a huge number of issues and related to assessment and evaluation. For example, as an assessor and evaluator, it comes to my mind that how can we reliably measure, grade, and certify outcomes at different domains and levels of learning? This is the major question, and the question at the beginning itself strikes in our mind as an assessor. Then assessment, when, what, how much, how, and when we have assessed already, so what should we do with those assessment results, for what and how much we should consider those assessment. Then different functions of assessment needs to be understood. What are those? How can we ensure their validity and reliability? What are the kinds of interpretations we can make out of this assessment, which is made by us? It's some kind of judgment which we make individually. Then how can we make good assessment plan itself? What are the important statistical tool which needs to be brought into when we are dealing with such assessment and evaluation tools? Then also we need to update ourselves the current status of R&D in this field again. So there are a lot more questions, but I have just put in some of those questions. it is not possible to elaborately discuss about all those factors, but these questions can be answered to some extent if we understand assessment pyramid very well. So assessment pyramid, it says when we design our assessment, that some kind of like levels we should follow. So this assessment pyramid is a very simple simplified pyramid, or it is also known as Miller's pyramid because it was proposed by Miller's, especially in the clinical studies. And they propose that base of this pyramid is known as no level pyramids, and you should take this level of the pyramid for your assessment when one should only assess for facts, concepts, principles that learners can recall and describe. Then if we move up into the pyramid, then it goes to knows how pyramid. It says if already they know the facts, concept, principles, then I should just go to the higher level where whether they can apply those facts, concepts to solve some of the proposed problems. And then moving further to higher level, which is shows level, where an assessor, we can create a simulated setting and we can assess them, or we can find their performance in simulated setting. And at the topmost level, when we see what do they do at that level, and it is the does level of the pyramid. So what the learners do in the real world. So these are the factors which as an assessor we need to understand what is the level which and what point of the course, and which course also. It is not required all course or all subjects needs to start from the base of the pyramid in itself. So as an assessor, we needs to keep this in our mind, that if we take these levels properly, then only we can drive the learning, because the proper choice of the level is important, as assessment also drives learning. Like, I'm a civil engineer, so I'll just give you some of the examples of how these different levels can be defined. But as all of you know well, and you can correlate with your own domain, like no level, if I just talk about where we have just now we have shown some of the example from my own domain. I've just shown, like when for example, if I say show the center of pressure of any lamina immersed under liquid is always below its centroid. It's a simple facts they should know, like center of pressure is always below the centroid. So what is centroid, what is center of pressure, they should know, and it lies below the centroid. So this is a no level, a very no level. And when do we actually create our assessment element at this no level? I have to diagnose my learner, and then we should choose. Like, for example, another example is describe the steps of Gauss-Seidel method. So they simply know the facts about this particular method, and they should discuss about the different steps. Then why do we employ over relaxation in Gauss-Seidel method? So this kind of things, and as you can see, some more I have just highlighted. I'm not going to talk in detail. So this is the first level. Then know-how level, where we know, like I have just taken one example from my domain. So knowing those concepts and facts from the base level of the pyramid, here some kind of problem has been given. So the centroid, center of pressure, the pressure distribution, those kind of facts, if they know, they are in a position to solve this problem. So one problem has been given to them. So this is little higher into the pyramid, and I have to understand where I am assessing this, for whom I am assessing this. Accordingly, I have to choose. So this is the second level. Now, shows level, where now the time to assess and in what stage of your course or subject you are going to choose your pyramid level, that is also important. So here a simulated problem has been given. It has been synthetically created one dam problem where they need to analyze a lot of forces and then stability of the dam. So entire problem has been simulated, and they have to apply both the lower two levels of the pyramid which they have already crossed and here. So at what stage of your course or in which course you start from this particular level, as an assessor, you need to understand. So again, another example I have given here, which is again from my domain of like contaminant transport model. So they should know some of this base 2 levels like facts and problem solving, and then they can simulate this simulated setting, and they can show their performance of how the contaminants get distributed in a water flow system, and they can solve this particular problem, where the third level of pyramid is used to assess the learners. Now, DUS level, which in real world, they can correlate with the, so at the same time, we have to also understand that which course needs which level. At the same time, a single course, how much weightage has to be given to which level, that is also important. So here, let's say example is here, it has been proposed that in a city called Mangalore, the coastal city of, which is a coastal city of Karnataka, there was an accidental leakage of raw petroleum from a refinery. After 1 month of time, a groundwater well located at a distance of 1 kilometer from the refinery is detected with contaminated water, and level of concentration is assessed as some value it has been mentioned. So list all the data needed to analyze this problem of groundwater contamination, assess the fate of groundwater in 5 kilometer square area around the refinery, and estimate the concentration of contaminant at every 100-meter distance by applying the contaminant transport modeling. So this actually shows some problem in real world which has happened. There was no detailed information given to the learner. Now learner has already crossed the 3 levels of assessment. They have been already assessed for those 3 levels. They are in the real world, and they show how actually they perform to solve this real life problem. So whether my component of the, or my course, the course objective, it allows me to go this particular level, we as an assessor, as an evaluator, we need to understand. However, in current scenario, this is my personal experience, what I find, because of the huge digital or online resources available, most of the time we do not define these levels, and we straight away maybe we impose without defining the different level of assessment to the learners, and it becomes challenging for them, especially if they do not actually go through the different levels and they reach to that level to actually accept that kind of challenge. Now, with all these basics, which is not possible all the time directly to be kept into mind while designing. However, if we follow that to some extent and then finally come with some ABCs of the assessment method, we understand that it is not possible to have some silver bullets for assessment in general. There are different methods and they have their own purposes, strengths and weaknesses. That's why the optimal mix is actually talked about. So in making decisions about which methods to use, one can make or one can follow the ABCs, which says assess at the appropriate level of pyramid, be aware of the weaknesses of each method and the factors that will influence the validity in your own setting which you have created for the assessment and evaluation. Consider the complementarity of the different methods. So complementarity is one of the important factors. That's why the optimal mix has been talked about in the overall program of assessment, to leverage the strength of different methods and compensate for their individual weaknesses. These are some of the
sorry, I typically finish around 3, Professor Shibani. If you can just maybe try to wrap it up, I think that would be great.
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay, yes, sorry. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, so this actually now coming to the grading practices. We all know the grading practices, what we follow. I'm just going to discuss about some of this factor about the grading. So when we finally, after the assessment and evaluation designing, when we talk about the grading, it is important for us to understand maximizing the positives and minimizing the negatives of the grading, so that inoculate the learner against unreasonable ideas about the grades and develop valid assessment for learnings and skills. Then also reliable and meaningful grading techniques to determine level of assessment. I will quickly just show you which will be important here, the grading which we follow by different grading, relative grading, absolute grading. Then there are different self-evaluation by students, which in current scenario given more importance. These other systems which we call, I'll just give you peer grading, then contract grading, and so on. So with this, let me just come to some of these grading scales, which finally needs to be understood well, is that different scales, like example 2 category system, where simply we talk about credit, no credit, pass, fail, and then 5 category, 13 category. However, this category depends on the kind of reliability which we expect to be to follow. So some of the literature which discuss about the reliability of 0.95 as the maximum or base of the assessment. So based on that, it has been found that if some grading system, which is 2 category system, is followed, where the follows the reliability of 0.63. 5 category, in the reliability increases because the category of the grading is increased. Then if we move further to 13 category, it further increases to 0.93. So if further, I just for listeners, I give some reference here. If you want in detail how this reliability is associated with the different category of grading, one can understand from here. So I'm not going into how the relative grading and all is followed. I'm just going to show you that like what we follow the grading system, 8 category grading system. So based on the reliability which has been shown from the base of the pyramid, which is 0.95 and 2 category, then 5 category and 13 category, if we just look into that 0.95 as the base, and then we have 2 category as 0.63, 5 category 0.85. So 8 category falls between 5 category and 13 category with the 0.93. So based on that linear variation, somewhere 88% of the reliability of this our grading system is followed. However, it has to be judiciously chosen which grading we should follow based on the kind of subjects or courses we grade, and our objective which is followed in that particular course. Again, the great weightage of the assessment component plays an important role when we follow this grading category in itself. So where and what phase of the study we should give the greater weightage, and so on. Well, as you can see, as an example, I have put like 2 grading system. It has been followed here, absolute and relative. However, it varies. It is not giving the same category. The first one, which is shown, if I follow the absolute grading system, it gives me this grading system, whereas relative, it gives me different for the same raw marks obtained by the learner, which has been shown. So again, finally, let me just bring into as an assessor, as an evaluator, and academician in overall, if we just put some of the key points which is important for us to keep in a nutshell. And those key points are, we should understand the roles and responsibility very well. Then we need to have a proper pedagogic technique and teaching and learning methods. So we should also have a proper training for assessment, evaluation, grading approaches, then curriculum design and content development training, then diagnosing the learner. It is important for the trainer to train themselves how to diagnose the learner. Then finally, adopting technology for teaching and learning evaluation. Then enabling ethical practices is one of the important factor when you can see that when whichever education policy gives greater autonomy, it is important. Then inoculating academic education leadership is also important in certain scenario, and especially in this current autonomy, greater autonomy system. So enabling the cultural shift is required to adapt this changing education policies. Then student-centric models, which is now more and more dominant, is also to be understood well as an evaluator and assessor. Competency-based continuation evaluation system is one of the factors needs to be taken into consideration when we design such elements. Also, our assessment should also take into research and innovation, which is a focus of the current scenario, and STEAM to STEM model. So we cannot follow the siloed approach, which was taken care earlier. Also, the autonomy at all levels, which is followed, which gives us to understand these facts very well, and boost to online training again also gives us how we blend our learning system, and at the same time the output in terms of assessment and evaluation. Finally, especially in context of India, it is one of the important factor. Through all these objectives, finally we reach to enhance our gross enrollment ratio, which is one of the important factor in context of country like India. So with this, I must just refer to one of this statement by Nelson Mandela, that a final goal is to understand that education is the most powerful weapon, and which is used mostly to change the world. So we can use this to simply change the world. So our entire objective should look into the larger goal when we follow each of these small objectives to, through our activities. So with this, let me just conclude. Thank you so much actually for your patience hearing and giving your time. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ivan. I'm just done, so it is over to you.
Thank you, Professor Shibani, for this interesting presentation. Covers lots of things from changes in the history and then assessment items. Thanks again. We typically conclude around 3 p.m. Australian time, and I think 10:30. So maybe we just have only like one question. Actually, I wanted to ask you a question about your assessment items, because you talk about this pyramids at different levels of assessing students. So I was just wondering, what kind of assessment items, assessment plan do you typically use for your courses? Like typically, many people just use maybe final exams or like mid-semester exams, projects. Which one do you think will be probably like better ways to assess a student, so that we can look at different levels, like they know how and like they do and show? So that would be my question.
Yes, yeah, it's a very relevant question. I think it bothers all of us, because we deal with undergraduate students, postgraduate student, and research student. So again, in the undergraduate, as you understand, in current scenario, the undergraduate students also are driven towards research. So there has been a radical change into the assessment methods currently. So quite good combination of this different level is important. When I take the same undergraduate level for level student as a project student, I start with the maybe the third level actually, the third level of assessment pyramid. That is important. Like if given a simulated situation which is nearly replicating the real world problem, whether they can actually perform well into that simulated setting, and as they are still the graduate students, but they are handling a project, so they should begin with that. So I begin with that because they are under the project. So once they show their performance and I can assess them, they are eligible and they have got that, then I can actually introduce to them the highest level, DAS level, which is the real field. Now, as far as the regular semester exam is concerned, if my experience, if I just tell you, I divide the component because there is a regular assessment in our curriculum design, especially in BITS Pilani, what we follow. So every section is assessed every week or like in a 15 days, whatever way. So at the beginning, the lower level of assessment is done. But when we come about the semester examination, where the overall assessment is done. Semester examination, you don't do the assessment, you do the evaluation in itself. So you have almost done the various know and know-how level assessment during your this thing. So there can be a mix of, and weightage can be given lower to the know and know-how, and then simulated level, the third level can be given a greater weightage. So it depends on which class you are taking care and how you give the weightage. That is important. So what I do, this is my personal experience, I well mix this different strata and then I give. Because of the continuation evaluation system, you have that particular benefit.
Well, thanks for answer. We actually do something similar here at Griffith. We do different types of assessments at different levels in the course. So we can do sometimes exams, we have projects or quizzes so that we can also test students' knowledge and give them feedback. Yeah, kind of the similar things. I just probably like want to finish it right now because we're already running out of time, and just want to thank you again for this interesting presentation and your time. Thank you, Professor Shibani, and thank you everybody who attended this presentation. So I'm just going to stop recording, and then I would like to wish everybody a good day and enjoy the upcoming weekend.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Ivan. Thank you, Dr. Hugo and Professor